Thank you for joining us in this conversation. It's an honor for me to be able to represent Puerto Rico as part of Adult PR in the Indie Media Arts South. The truth is that Puerto Rico is a region on our own, a Caribbean island with a very complex political and cultural identity. But as part of this initiative, it's very powerful to be able to participate in the conversation regarding filmmaking and to be able to share our stories. So I am very glad to present you to my colleagues and dear friends, Lorraine and Karen, directors of Alma and Ser Grande. Can you please tell us more about yourself, your background and career? Maybe we can start with Karen and then Lorraine.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful to be here. Let's see, I started filmmaking back in 1998, so it's been a ride. Mostly, I have spent time in Puerto Rico as a documentary filmmaker. Yeah, I consider myself, I have a background in journalism, but since 1998, I've been mainly focused on documentary filmmaking as a writer director, and I think as most of us in Puerto Rico as a producer, because it's really the only way to get independent filmmaking done out here. So yeah, I'm very proud to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Lorraine, and I'm very grateful to be here as well. I have been making films for quite some time, but mainly producing short films in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic and in New York. And then I've worked a bit in TV and was able to make a documentary film. And then I was able to write and direct my first short fiction film, which is Alma, and now I'm in the post production of a feature length film called Esta Isla. So that's a little bit about me.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, thank you. So Karen, how did you come with the story for the main story for Ser Grande, and what has been your intention to share it with the audience?
I think Ser Grande comes from a combination of frustration and hope. I think that has guided a lot of what I have done. I was frustrated with the fact that increasingly in Puerto Rico, and I think in many parts of the world, nonprofit organizations and communities are doing the work that the government is failing to do. I think in the case of Puerto Rico, the neglect with the public school system is sincerely shameful. I think we have a public policy that is not putting the best interest of education and of young men and women at the center. So when I discovered the work of Puerto Rico Youth at Risk, I was very impressed with the psychological focus of their work and how much individual work they do with each young person, but also in a collective context. And I was just sincerely impressed with their work. And so I suggested to them that instead of doing some kind of portrait of the organization, that we should follow 3 participants and see what happens in the life of a young person when they have a mentor and a model, a system that is really working to help them look within for answers, and also providing tools just for them to be able to thrive and to understand, what do I really want to do when I get out of high school, and how am I going to get there? And what I'm hoping that comes out of this from an audience really is a conversation. I think that filmmaking is a very powerful tool to show diversity, to show realities that are different from our own, and then to be able to build conversations around the films that we watch, so that we can look for solutions, so that we can start providing support for the nonprofits and for the communities who are just honestly doing a lot of the work that the government should be doing, because they are receiving our taxes and the federal funding, but they're just failing miserably. So I think we all need to find solutions and to find initiatives that that can really benefit from our support. And that's my hope with this film.
Beautiful. Thank you. And how about you, Lorraine? How did
Yeah.
the story came to you? Why do you decide to tell the story?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that I really feel so privileged and happy to be here with you both, whom I admire, and I love the work that you both do. And also, Karen, I feel like there's a very strong similarity in why I chose to do this film, which it feels like this hopelessness of things that you see that just don't get worked out the way they should within many levels of our society and culture and system. For me, it's a based on a true story of my two cousins who went out for a run one morning and never returned. They were murdered, and it's unfortunately never, no one has been accused. There's no one arrested, for example, for the crime. And definitely, I felt a lot of hopelessness. And I just was like, I have to do something. So I'm gonna tell a story about this, and I want people to remember them, and I want to talk about this topic, which I feel, because it also has to do with gender-based violence, and it's just topics that I think are just ingrained in our society to not really talk about it, and it's like a taboo, and I definitely had to deal with that while making the film, but it's something that needs to be done even more.
Thank you. So you are both living and working full-time in Puerto Rico, which has the unique position of being of the Caribbean and the other complexities of our colonial status, and that. How is your film kind of a portrait of the contemporary Puerto Rican Caribbean, Puerto Rico Caribbean / Caribbean or something like that? Karen, you can go.
Well, I think inevitably everything we do as filmmakers from Puerto Rico, especially when we were born and raised here and we currently live here, somehow it's like we're all trying to decolonize our own mind. And filmmaking is a wonderful tool to experiment that. I think inevitably when you're born and raised in a colony, there's a part of you that doesn't feel like you own anything. We don't own our land. We don't own a lot of decisions that affect our livelihood, our quality of life. A lot of decisions made in the United States, we don't get to vote for those decisions, but they directly impact us. So I think that's always in the back of our minds. I think part of my frustration with a broken public school system is that it is precisely in education that we could decolonize our own minds and our own individual selves so that we can collectively create spaces where we do not behave like we're part of a colony. I think the political situation is what it is, and we have been fighting that for decades, and there's a long history of that national fight. But there's also a lot that we can do to create spaces where we do not need to live under that cloud, where we can actually create our little utopias, and just free ourselves of this way of thinking and this way of seeing ourselves in the world, right? Which is like what a colony does inevitably. And I think the reason I'm attracted to this kind of story is because it is about empowering individuals in a collective environment so that we can continue empowering each other and eventually empowering the entire island, to just look for solutions for ourselves, to be the writers of our own story and the authors of our own story, and not to think that there's nothing we can do about it just because we're in this political situation.
Perfect and beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
what about you, Lorraine?
Yeah, I feel like I totally agree with that. And I think just to say a little bit more and basically touch on the same topics that Karen was talking about, I think, you know, it's so important that we continue to tell our stories, our own real, honest stories about what's happening to us, about what we're seeing, what we're living. so that not only can we see it and learn from it, but others can see, others here in Puerto Rico. Like, I think there's so much strength in really feeling and seeing on a big screen, or really on any screen, you know, the life that you're living, something that you really connect with. That there's so much power, and like there's so much to grow from when you can do that. So I think that it's really important, and I think that it's happening. There are a lot of films being made, a lot of important stories, and very honest to our situation, to all the things that we're going through, and it definitely does empower people, for sure.
Thank you. What do you think it's like are the major challenges of making films in Puerto Rico? And also, what are the major assets that we have to, being filmmakers in Puerto Rico? Because personally, I think that some of our complexities are also our great strengths, can be our great strengths, or I want to see them in that way. I don't know how you see that, but for you, what are the big challenges of making films in Puerto Rico and the assets?
I think as an independent filmmaker, definitely funding and distribution are a huge challenge in Puerto Rico. Funding because we don't have a local fund for local filmmakers. And that is a huge struggle. And that is actually something in which we have set ourselves back, because we used to have a film fund specifically for local filmmakers. And the minute that they decided at the government level that they were not going to support that anymore, that puts us in a great disadvantage, because the first money is usually the hardest money to get. When you have a story that you need to explain to people what it's going to be, it's really the most difficult money to get is the first funding. And usually filmmakers can rely on a local fund as that initial seed money to then go out into the world and look for more funding. So that's definitely a huge challenge. And then distribution. I think for me, I'm already 48 years old. I would love to make a living doing what I do. This is what I love to do. It's what I've been doing since 1998. But the truth is that I always need alternative sources of income, because I cannot make my livelihood in Puerto Rico only by telling the stories that I want to tell. And so I always have the hope that if I find a way of distribution, that would definitely help me out in being able to be a full-time filmmaker. In terms of the assets, I think we're all here because we have so much to say about what happens in this island. Puerto Rico is geographically small, but incredibly diverse. It is such a heterogeneous place to live in culturally. Even in this small amount of space, you can find so many profound, interesting, colorful stories to tell. And I think that's what we're all passionate about. It might be easier to pursue a career elsewhere because of all these challenges of funding and distribution, but we're all in love with the kinds of stories and the kinds of characters that we can pursue here. And I think for me, that's definitely what keeps me here. I am absolutely in love with the characters that I run into every time I am blessed to make a film here. And it's what I honestly want to continue exploring.
Bello. And what about you, Lorraine? What do you think?
Yeah, I think funding is definitely crucial. And I think that the issue of funding also goes back to the colonial status, or like, what is Puerto Rico, and these issues that I think it's a complex, issue, but it definitely creates a huge problem in getting, a feature length film, for example, made. Um, if you want to be here in Puerto Rico and make your film here, it is really so difficult to make that a reality and still be honest to the stories that that you want to tell. I mean, yeah, that's the distribution is obviously something that would help, and which is also, I think, like maybe culturally, if there were more initiatives to see the value of our own filmmaking in Puerto Rico, that would be so helpful and healing as a society. And like, but there's a long way to go on that, I think.
Perfect. Well, we are running out of time. I just want to say that I am very glad that we happen to, we can make this conversation. I admire you so much. And I love your work. I think it's a very important work for all the Puerto Rican community. And I'm very grateful that that you are with me in this initiative, in this special edition of the IMAS Screening Series. Thank you for joining us for this second edition of the IMAS Screening Series. Thank you again, filmmakers Karen Rossi and Lorraine Jones Molina. Thank you to our sponsors, the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, Empowering World-Changing Work, and to our presenting partners, Adult PR, the Haiti Heritage Film Festival, and the Luminal Theater. Again, please see more about indie media arts and South at imasouth.org. And I invite you to stay connected with the work of the Puerto Rican film community through adultpr.org. Thank you so much.